Okay, so in this part, since the sketch dried up a little bit, we are going to block colors, and we're going to do a very basic block color. I'm going to try to use a slightly thicker round brush, number 4. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to find the darkest areas in the painting. This is a blocking stage, so that means that we're using bigger shapes and we're not really that bothered by too much detail. I'm working with burnt umber and titanium white, and that's because we're doing a monochromatic sketch. Take your time, work slowly, try to find the right proportions as you're blocking in. Again, certain things can be adjusted later on, but the more you get right now at this stage, the better. And obviously, if you're blocking in the colors, you can, to an extent, simplify the tones and the values, which means that even though there may be some differences in tones between like similar tones, you can paint them with the same tone just for now, because all the little details that go in later, they're going to be added later. They're going to be the details. That's the whole point, that you know, details are details. I'm now mixing a little bit of titanium white with burnt umber, and you can probably already see that the saturation of it changes. You'll see it more as you observe how I add more white. White has the effect of it kind of makes the colors more pastel-y, more powdery. It takes the saturation out of the color, just the same as black, by the way. So for example, here we were using raw or a burnt umber as straight from the tube without mixing it with anything, so that's the true color. It's very saturated, and so is the background as well, just for the same reason. If I were painting one of my commissions, I would probably, well, I usually work in colors, so this is just a very easy block in burnt umber and titanium white. But if it was a proper full painting in colors, I would be doing this in color. So I'd have way more colors in my palette, and I would be mixing those colors and blocking in the same exact way. So if you find out that you have a painting that you want to do in color, just do that. Just follow those guidelines, but do it in color. And yeah, obviously when you're working with color. You have to be a little, maybe tiny bit more careful, because, for example, right now I do not have to really clean my brush, because even if I put too much umber, I can go with a little bit of white on top. I can put a different color on. So if I have a, I don't know how to call it, a dirty brush, I guess, it's still within the same two colors, so I can mix. But if I were to paint a shadow that has a lot of reds in it, but I was painting something else, like a piece of clothing with a green paint or blue paint, then any type of extra color is really going to change the reds and the new color that I'm trying to work with. So that's why when working with color you have to be a little bit more cautious. Oops, I think I have a camera a little bit too close to the painting, and I have to hold my brush a little differently, because I keep catching on the camera, so I made it even harder for myself now. So right over here next to the tear duct, skin is definitely whiter or brighter. It's not whiter, but in this case it's kind of always think about those shapes like you would when you would be painting a sphere or something more familiar, something easier in shape, because really those are just simplified or maybe more organic shapes, but they still work the same way as a sphere or a cube. So this part of the skin is already lit better. It's still a block in, so I'm not that worried about little tiny changes in color. Just more or less want to get similar colors in. Just have fun. I'm going to maybe move the camera a little tiny bit. There you go. It's going to help me as well. Oh yeah, I have more space here now. You can use a bigger brush. I'm kind of, if it was a bigger portrait, I'd probably be using bigger brushes. I'd be blocking with a bigger brush and slightly less details. I'm trying to work fast. I'm going to speed up now because I'm just going to paint a little bit of flesh around everything else. You always want to, if you're doing a sketch like that, you want to paint some flesh around as well. You don't want to just leave the eye without the surrounding. This is just going to look weird. And depending how fast you paint, you also have to take it into consideration how fast paints dry. Because right now we're doing this tutorial, or I'm doing this tutorial with burnt umber. Burnt umber, even mixed with white or other colors, it does dry really fast. And in addition to that, I'm painting this during summer, and it also affects how fast things things dry. Only yesterday I was painting a portrait in burnt umber. It was also a sketch, just for the values and just for fun, really tiny one, and it just dried up, or dried in less than a day. I was shocked, but it's a warm summer, so even though oil paints don't dry, they oxidize. The amount of moisture in the air affects. Oops, that's the wrong color. How did that? So the amount of moisture and sun and UV rays, they really affect how fast oil paints dry still. I prefer personally if they dry longer. Even though I work really fast, I generally prefer if I can blend colors, because I really work on the whole entire painting usually. It's hard to tell now that I'm working only on the eye, but I usually try to work on the entire painting, going from left to right, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit on the nose, a little bit on the eye. And this way my eyes can they don't get tired with one thing. I have more flexibility in observing what I'm painting. So when I do that, I prefer to be able to actually mix certain colors after like an hour of working on one area. I want to go back and work on a different part of the face, but still be able to work freely and have the paint mix easily. I'm trying to add some white right now. But not too much. I kind of want to reserve some space for future details, but I'm already starting to think about this, the whites of her eyes. In terms of how much you can see that it's a bowl. And I just noticed that I made a tiny bit of mistake. I really painted the iris a little too small. Go. Oops. See, now you can see what happens when you don't. Clean up your brush. Okay, so at this point I kind of painted it over, which is fine because I got a little tired trying to fix the sides. I'm more interested in the shape of the iris. It's easier for me to block in. And on top of this, I can really lighten up this part, the bottom of the iris, and it's not a problem. So I just decided to do the whole thing. Sometimes you have to make bolder decisions, not be scared to paint over something. if you don't like how it's going. Just erase it, paint over, don't worry. And the eye doesn't yet look extremely pretty. But once we start refining edges with a smaller brush, adding details, it'll all make sense. Well, at least I hope so. You can see this part of the white is a little darker, mostly because of eyelashes that you can't see yet. I can see it on my reference photo, but I'm not putting any eyelashes in because they're gonna come in the end. All right, so that is it. That's the block and phase. Or maybe I'm just gonna very quickly, I don't like leaving so, I don't like painting so close to the eye. Just gonna I'm gonna give it some space. Because, you know, as I said, your eye is a part of a bigger picture. It'll look more realistic if you give it some space, and if you make sure that the viewer later on is going to be able to see how the eye sits. All right. So that's the block and phase. The next one is going to be refining phase.